In 1974, Nestlé possessed internal research confirming their marketing strategy in the developing world was driving mothers away from breastfeeding and replacing it with a product those mothers couldn't afford and couldn't safely prepare. An estimated 1 million infants would die in the years that followed. No executive was ever charged. The public was never told. They knew, and they buried it. So why has no one ever told you this? Nestlé. The name is practically synonymous with comfort. Chocolate, warm kitchens. By the 1970s, Nestlé was one of the largest food corporations on Earth, and their infant formula products, Lactogen, Nestogen, were marketed as modern, scientific, superior to nature itself. In a developing world hungry for Western progress, that pitch landed hard. Hospitals endorsed it. Doctors recommended it. Mothers believed it. The company had spent decades building a reputation as a brand that fed families and nurtured life. That reputation was the product, and it was about to become the cover. Here's what was happening inside the company while that image was being carefully maintained. Nestlé was deploying what they called mothercraft nurses into hospitals across Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia. These were company sales representatives, not medical professionals dressed in white uniforms. They walked maternity wards. They sat beside new mothers. They handed out free formula samples and framed the choice as modern, responsible parenting. The tactic was deliberate, and it exploited something biological. When a new mother stops breastfeeding, even for a few days, her milk supply begins to decline. Within weeks, it's gone. That window was Nestlé's entire strategy. By the time the free sample ran out, the mother had no fallback. But formula in these markets cost between 30 and 50% of a working family's monthly income. So mothers stretched it. They diluted the powder with water, and in regions without reliable clean water, that choice was a death sentence. By 1974, this was documented inside Nestlé. A British charity called War on Want published a report that same year detailing these exact tactics with names, dates, and countries. They titled it The Baby Killer. Nestlé's response was not to stop, it was to sue. A Swiss advocacy group translated the report and republished it under the headline Nestlé Kills Babies. Nestlé took them to court. The trial ran 2 years. Nestlé won on a narrow libel finding, but the judge's own verdict stated plainly that the company's marketing practices were unethical and required immediate change. Nestlé issued a press statement, announced an internal review, and then continued largely as before. But here's the part they really didn't want out. In 1981, the World Health Organization passed the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes. It banned free samples in hospitals. It banned sales representatives in nursing uniforms. It banned all advertising that framed formula as equivalent or superior to breastfeeding. 118 countries voted in favor. 1 country voted against it. The United States, under the Reagan administration, stood alone on the wrong side of that vote. Nestlé, headquartered in Switzerland, was not bound by any law. They were invited to comply voluntarily. They declined. Independent monitoring organizations documented Nestlé continuing to violate the WHO code through the 1980s and into the 1990s. Free samples resurfacing in hospitals in Indonesia, Bangladesh, Nigeria. The company was audited, found non-compliant, given time to adjust, audited again, and given more time. Meanwhile, UNICEF and WHO were estimating that approximately 1.5 million infants were dying annually from unsafe feeding practices, deaths driven in significant part by formula use in environments where clean water was inaccessible, and dilution was the only option mothers had left. And here is the number Nestlé reported in those same years: billions in formula revenue from developing markets. They didn't just profit from this. Growth in developing world formula sales was a headline figure in their annual earnings reports. They called it expansion. They called it reaching underserved communities. Remember those internal documents from 1974, the ones that confirmed what the marketing was doing. They were never released. They were never subpoenaed. No Nestlé executive stood trial. No product was recalled. no government levied a fine. What happened instead was a boycott organized by a coalition of churches and advocacy groups in the United States in 1977, spreading internationally through the early 1980s. Nestlé eventually signed a set of commitments. The boycott was suspended, violations continued, and the boycott was reinstated in 1988. That boycott has never officially ended. It is still listed as active today. The system designed to stop Nestlé was a voluntary international code with no enforcement mechanism, monitored by nonprofits with no legal authority. The company had teams of lawyers, decades of institutional knowledge, and a brand so large and so embedded in daily life that most consumers never connected a chocolate bar to a maternity ward in Lagos. That gap between what the company did and what the public believed about the company was not an accident. It was the strategy. The WHO code still exists. It still has no binding enforcement. And a 2023 investigation found aggressive formula marketing continuing in hospitals across Africa and Southeast Asia, using tactics that mirror precisely what War on Want documented 50 years ago. Nothing changed. The executives who built this system retired with full pensions. The brand survived. And the machinery that protected them is still in place, which means the only thing standing between the next version of this story and the public is whether anyone decides to bury it first.